Hi guys, Becky from The Dedicated Dog here. In this video I'm going to be talking about the prong collar, talking about why we use it, and then later I'll show you how to properly fit it on your dog. So I know there's a lot of misconceptions out there, and a lot of people think that the prong collars are scary and meant to hurt their dogs and they're afraid to use them. And part of this video is going to be clearing some of those things up. So part of the reason why I think people are afraid of prong collars is just based on the look of them, and I totally get it. They look barbaric, they look like a torture device, but that honestly could not be further from the truth. These are actually designed to be very gentle and to allow us to give very little leash pressure with this collar versus what you might need to use on a flat buckle collar to get the same kind of direction with your dog. So the prong collar is designed to give pressure all around the neck, so the prongs evenly distribute pressure all around the neck, and there's actually a distributor plate right in the middle, and you can see that these prongs are facing different directions. And what that does is it just makes sure that pressure is evenly distributed around the collar when leash pressure is applied. So if you attach the leash here, when you go to apply pressure, the prong constricts from all sides, versus on a flat buckle collar, if you attach the leash, if you're walking your dog and you attach the leash here, wherever you're pulling on the leash, the opposite side of the collar is going to be getting the full force of that pressure. So typically when you are walking your dog, or you'll see dogs walking that are coughing and choking and they're pulling, that's because the leash is putting all of this pressure from your dog pulling and from you pulling back directly on their trachea, because usually the flat collars will sit pretty low on the dog's neck, and that puts pressure right on the trachea, which can be really painful for your dog and can cause health problems if your dog pulls on the leash all the time, constantly. So the prong collar is actually a really good alternative to a flat collar, for the reason that it evenly distributes that pressure versus having it directly on the trachea. So whereas when you pull on this, you're getting that pressure on the other side of the collar. When you apply leash pressure using the prong collar, what it does is it constricts and it applies pressure from all sides of the neck. And actually this distributor plate, if it's placed, depending on where you place this, if it's placed right on the trachea, it's actually not putting any pressure really there as much. It's more putting it where all these prongs are. So the important thing to know when we're talking about the prong collar is brand is important. I only use the Springer brand of prong collars, and that's the only one I recommend to my clients. I will put a link to the website in the description of this video. I only buy direct from the website because I know exactly where it's coming from. I know the quality is going to be what I'm looking for, and I know there's not going to be any nuances. I know sometimes you can get Springers from third-party websites like Amazon or even Chewy, but I've ordered one from there before and it seemed to be of different quality and not of the best quality. So the reason why we use Springers is because they're made of stainless steel, so they're not going to bend or break or come apart easily, where some of the other knockoff brands may. The other reason is these prongs are actually very dull. So they're not going to pierce the skin. They're not going to poke holes in your dog's neck. They're very dull. Some of the other brands that I've seen out there at like the big chain pet stores, the way that the points are fashioned, they are pointy and they can cause skin abrasion. So we definitely don't want that. We want this to be a humane training tool, in that it's not causing harm, it's just putting pressure on these points. So a lot of people are thinking that I'm not going to use a prong collar because I love my dog and I don't want to hurt my dog, and this is not meant to hurt your dog, and I'm going to show you that it does not hurt. I'll show you how to fit this on my dog, but when you have it fit, it's just resting on my neck. It's not, if there's no pressure applied, it's not putting any pressure on. So if once you teach your dog how to use a prong collar, you shouldn't be constantly having to use this. It should just be there as a tool to help remind them in certain instances to respond to leash pressure and to get back into a heel, for instance. So this is not going to be constantly digging into their neck. If it's sized appropriately and put appropriately on their neck. And what I mean by that is the prong collar should fit very high in your dog's neck, not low where a flat collar would sit, because again, that's putting pressure on that trachea potentially. Even though it's distributing, it could put a little bit of pressure depending on where your collar is placed. So when you apply pressure on the leash pressure, so if the leash is attached here, if your dog goes to pull, or if you go to apply leash pressure to guide your dog in a certain direction, it's just going to constrict from all sides. It's not going to pierce your dog. It doesn't hurt. As you can see, it's not going to leave marks. I walk both my dogs on a prong collar every day. I've never had any issues of them getting injured on it because I'm making sure that the tools that I'm using are safe and that I'm using them properly. Not gonna lie, a dog can get hurt on a prong collar if you're using it improperly. The same way a dog can get hurt on a flat collar or a harness or a slip lead. If you're not using the tools properly, things can happen and your dog can get hurt. So you should not be afraid of the tool as long as you know how to use it properly and how to size it and put it on your dog properly. So the way that you would put this, so the way that the prong collar works is there's kind of a couple different versions that Hermspringer has on their website. This one happens to be the quick release version. So it has a quick release feature, and this is more for people that struggle a little bit with the, maybe don't have as much hand dexterity to be able to pinch this, to be able to open the collar, and then again pinch these prongs together to be able to put the collar back together. And that's actually a reason this can also be called a pinch collar, because you're actually having to pinch the individual prongs to put the collar on enough. It's not pinching the dog, it's called a pinch collar because that's how you're having to put the collar on and take it off. You just have to be careful when you're putting the prong collar on your dog that you're getting it into the proper position. So you have to pinch. So that is the proper way to attach the collar. Sometimes you'll see people will accidentally put one in and then put the other one here, think it's together, and then if you go to put give a slight correction, this can pop off because it's not in there properly. So it needs to be in these two slots to really be on there safely. So that's how you would apply a normal prong collar. The easy attachment allows you to pinch here, which opens up this clasp, and then you can slide the chain through, put it on your dog, and then you have to slide it back through this hole and fit it into the clip. The reason I don't prefer this, unless you have some kind of physical limitation where you maybe cannot pinch this and not get this on the way that it needs to be put on. Unless you have an issue like that, I wouldn't recommend this, just because this does give the slight possibility that if something were to, like if your dog were to brush against this and the leash were to maybe brush against the other side, it can pop off. So it's just another weak point in the collar that can cause the collar to pop off, which leads me to safety backups. So anytime you're using a prong collar, you should absolutely be using a safety backup. And the reason why is because, like I said, sometimes this can open up. I have had a couple clients where this has popped open before. Sometimes if the collar definitely if you're using a knockoff brand of the Hermspringer, the collar is not necessarily made the best, so it can, if the dog like wiggles around or scratches at it, it can pop open. So the reason why we put safety backups on is to make sure that you're still attached to your dog should that happen. And I can show you on my dog too when I show you how to fit this. But what you do is you can either use a carabiner, so you're going to clip it to the O-ring on the collar, and then this will get clipped to their flat collar. So if this were to ever pop off, you're still attached to your dog through the flat collar. So you can use, a lot of people will use carabiners. I prefer to use a leash attachment just because it gives me a little bit more room than a carabiner. I get these off Etsy. You can definitely hand make these just with buying a couple clasps and cutting up a $3 leash, sewing it together if you have some sewing skills. But the same thing, you just attach it to this O-ring collar, or O-ring on the collar. And then if something were to happen, I have had, even with the Hermspringer, I have had instances where if my dog is really scratching at it, I try not to let them scratch a lot when they're wearing it just because it can happen. They can get a nail in here and pop it off. So if you have the leash attached to the swivel, so your leash doesn't get tangled while you're walking, not that it should if your dog is walking properly in heel. And then you have the backup attached to the O-ring here, and then this is attached to your flat collar. You can also attach the backup directly to the leash. So I have seen some people do this. So even if the collar pops off, your leash is directly attached to your flat collar, versus if it pops off and you're attached to the O-ring, you're still attached here. So the safety backup is super important because obviously you don't want to get into a situation where all of a sudden your dog's scratching, or you give it a correction for whatever you're working on, and suddenly you are no longer attached to your dog in the middle of the road. Definitely not a good situation to be in. So we always use backups with prong collars. All right, and then I'm going to show you how to properly fit this to your dog. Okay, so how to size your prong collar for your dog. So very rarely do I ever see people putting on the prong collar too tight. It's usually the opposite, where they put the prong collar on too loose, and it ends up, instead of sitting up here, like I talked about in the video, higher on the neck, it ends up sitting lower where a flat collar would sit, and still putting a little bit of that pressure on that trachea. It's not one point of pressure, so instead of having that one point of pressure, it's still, however many prongs there are, 12 points of pressure on the neck, but still not in the spot that we want it. So you want to make sure the prong collar is sitting up high on the neck. So if you have, come here, sit. A lot of times I'll see people that have prong collars that they will slide over the dog's head. If you're able to slide the collar over the dog's head, it's way too big. So you need to put it on by opening it up either through the pinch, or if you have one of the quick releases, using that. So when you put the collar on, it should sit right behind their ears. And it should be loose enough that it's not digging in, but it shouldn't start to slide down. Sometimes on some of the shorter coat, like pit bulls, or really any of the dogs that have that like really short coat, sometimes it can slide down a little bit more. So, and depending on the neck size, sometimes you'll find yourself in between, but ideally you want it to be sitting up here, not sliding down to where her flat collar is, because this is not a good spot to be putting any kind of pressure on her neck. The other thing about having it this high is this gives us much better control over sit. We're able to give a lot lighter leash pressure when it's sitting here than here because it gives us a little bit more control. We have a better control, with me? We have better control of her head versus if it's down here, it's a little bit less. So if you think of if you hold right here in your head and you turn it, you have a lot better control of your head than if you're down here. You're not really controlling your head, you're more trying to control your shoulders. If we can control the head, we can control the body. And in the situations where we're using the prong collar, it's to teach the dog a specific direction we're trying to take them. So if it's a dog that is reactive to other dogs, we may be using a prong collar to teach them, okay, turn, come to me now, instead of focusing on the other dog. So we need to have this directional leverage, which is why we use the prong collar, to kind of teach that pressure and release. I will be putting out another video that goes more in depth on how to really introduce the prong collar. This is more focusing on why we use it, what it is, and then how to fit it. So once you get the prong collar on, the leash attaches to the swivel here, and then don't forget your backup. So the backup's gonna hook to this O-ring on the other side of the chain martingale part of the collar, and then clip to the flat collar. So now, if we're out on a walk, and for some reason, say you didn't attach this all the way, you think you got it, but you're in a rush and it's not attached all the way, you're on a walk, you go to give a little bit of pressure and the collar pops off, you're still attached. Your dog's not going to be loose in the street. So make sure you're always putting that safety clip on. So if you can see, the collar's up really high on her neck. Then we have the safety backup attached to this O-ring, and then it clips to her flat collar here, and then the leash is attached to the swivel here. So sometimes, especially with this safety, this quick release, I will see people accidentally have this clipped over the part of the chain that their leash is clipped to, and that doesn't give us a very efficient leash pressure in terms of when we go to release, it's still kind of caught up here. So you want to make sure that the part that's attached to your safety is on the lower part of this chain, so you're not having any restrictions on the release part of the collar. So again, how it works is when you need to apply pressure, you pull, this chain tightens on the neck, and then you release and it goes back down to a looser collar, where you can see it's not digging into her at all. But when I need to use it, she's feeling that pressure all the way around. So that is how you fit your prong collar where it should be sitting on your dog. I hope this video was helpful. I hope it cleared up some of those misconceptions about prong collar use and it being a scary tool. It's really an awesome tool that can be really gentle if used properly and fitted properly to your dog. If you guys have any questions about any of this, please feel free to drop a comment or message me. But I hope this video was helpful. Thanks so much.